Okay, Professor Farhad, if you don't mind, we'll just get started with a quick introduction, and then we'll just have some conversation regarding, in general, regarding research and how to publish in highly reputable journals. And we already know your expertise in this field, so it'd be very informative for most of us. So I hope you don't mind sharing your experience and your expertise with us. So first of all, everyone, I'd like to introduce Professor Farhad Taghizadeh. He's a very well-known researcher in green economics and green finance research, and he's also a professor of economics at Tokai University, if I'm not mistaken. And there's so much to talk about Professor Farhad that I guess most of the people that they would be taking part in this webinar would they actually know you. They probably know you from your research, from your articles. So just a quick reminder of Professor Farhad's achievements. We could say that he's a vice president and co-founder of ISETS society in Australia. He's also a chief economist at Climate Finance Asia, based in Tokyo. In academia, Dr. Farhad has been ranked as 0.1% highly cited researcher in the world by Clarivate. And then he's also ranked at a top 2% economists, among top 2% economists in energy and economic research by Stanford as well. And then he's also Clarivate Research Front Awards winner in 2024. He has published more than 400 research articles, and then he's edited and authored over 30 books. And he's also working as editor-in-chief in many reputable journals and lots of journals as guest editor as well. So we'd like to welcome you, Dr. Farhad, to this webinar. And we can see that more and more people started joining us. Can you please introduce just a quick information about yourself, and then we can move on from there.
Yes. Hello, everyone. So I also would like to extend my thanks to Graduate School of Business and Entrepreneurship, to Dr. Kasimov, Dr. Said Aliyev, for your invitation. It is a pleasure to meet you all today. Yeah, I visited Uzbekistan, I think 2 times, and I really enjoyed, and I have good friends in Uzbekistan, including Dr. Said Aliyev, that we know each other since many years ago. And it is a pleasure to have this seminar today. My presentation is on empowering the energy transition through green finance. So while I'm presenting, I will also show some of the related publications. So then it means, in addition to having a seminar related to this topic, it would also be useful as for example, a research related presentation. Okay, shall I share my screen? Okay. Is it visible now? Yes.
Still the loading, the professor.
Oh, okay.
Yes, now is the visible.
Okay. So the topic of energy transition is among the hot topics. Many countries, they already set their targets for reducing the reliance on fossil fuels and increasing the share of renewable energy in their total energy portfolio. And for achieving the energy transition goals, so different countries have different targets, different goals for increasing share of renewable energy and reducing the carbon emission. But the most important thing is that, unfortunately, the global investment in sustainable project is not sufficient to achieve the goals that set by different countries. And after the pandemic and due to the economic recessions that resulted because of that, investment in sustainable projects even reduced more than before. And several reports by international organizations, such as the one by UNCTAD, World Investment, reveal that the annual investment gap is increasing. Annual investment gap in sustainability related project is increasing, and the gap is now about $4 trillion per year, which is about up 2.5 trillion in 2015 when the SDGs were adopted. And despite the growth in sustainable investment, the annual SDG investment gap in developing country has been widened from 2.5 trillion US dollar to about 4 trillion US dollar. And nowadays, in the when we are looking at the policies in the United States in the Trump era, we should expect that the sustainable investment even reduced more than this, because Trump is promoting fossil fuels and not so much believing in climate change and energy transition and so on. So we should expect that the gap be even larger in the in the following years. When we are looking at different sectors, energy, water and sanitation, transportation and telecommunication, food and agriculture, biodiversity, health and education, the largest investment requirement or the largest gap is related to the energy sector. So this shows the importance of this topic, importance of energy transition, and importance of investment requirement in order to fill this gap. And as the data shows, just by focusing, just by relying on the conventional financial resources, we cannot fill this gap. And in order to achieve the energy transition targets and carbon neutrality targets, so we need to introduce new financial instruments, new policies that can foster the development of renewable energy resources and bring more investment into these projects, such as national level carbon taxation or regional or global, national or regional rules, regulations, strategies on supporting the financing of renewable energy projects, facilitating the issuance of green bonds. Green rating is also important, because in order to avoid greenwashing, we need to have a taxonomy. We need to have a clear criteria that what is green, and in order to avoid the greenwashing. So establishment of green rating agencies are important. Targeting the energy subsidies, in many countries, still majority of the energy subsidies are directed to fossil fuel projects, and renewable energy projects are receiving the lower share from the total subsidies. And introducing de-risking tools, because one of the reasons that the investment is not sufficient in green project is because of existence of risk. So because of this matter, so my colleagues and in the past, I mean, 6 years, 7 years, we have been focused on this topic, on the topic of green finance. And first of all, for introducing new tools, policies, instruments that can bring the private investment into green projects, because just relying on public finance is not enough, and public finance cannot fill this finance gap, and we need more private investment. So researching on the policies that can bring more private investment, that can facilitate and incentivize the private sector to invest more in green projects. Secondly, designing tools, instruments, policies that can mitigate the risk is also another objective of our research. And also, finally, proposing these policies to governments, to financial institutions, and so on. So when talking about transition, there are various topics. For example, one of the most recent topics that I'm working on it is on just transition. So just transition, it means justified transition, because nowadays many people are talking about energy transition. So energy transition is good. So when we have more renewable energy and less fossil fuels, it means our environment is cleaner, and this will have impact on the quality of our life. But energy transition also has some negative externalities, because, for example, many people who are working in coal mines, many people who are working in oil companies, in fossil fuel related companies, they may lose their jobs. Many communities that they rely on the revenue from coal mining, revenue from fossil fuel related industries, they may suffer. So it will have impact on the social welfare of those communities. So just transition, it means working on policies, working on tools, instruments that can minimize the negative externalities of the transition by, considering the first objective of transition, which is moving from fossil fuel to renewable energy. For example, now, along with some other colleagues, I'm working on development of guidelines for banks, for financial institutions that can use these guidelines on just transition. So this means this topic, the topic of green finance, energy transition, just transition, is not just for academic output and just for journal publication. And this is what I always do, and I always set as my goal in my research. I always try to do a research that has some social impact, some impact on the society, and from that aspect, I try to be useful. I try that my research be useful. So like this. Okay, so up to now, I talked about importance of this topic and a background. So whenever we select a research topic, so maybe a topic that came to our mind, maybe we find it's very unique, it's very novel, it can fill the gap in the literature. These are good. But is it important? Is it really important that I spend my time, I spend my resources or my university resources for working on this topic? Nowadays, I see many papers, many econometrics papers that just assessing the impact of one thing on another thing. So ultimately, what problem this research is going to solve? So about the importance of doing this research, it's very important. And we need to ask ourselves before selecting a research topic. This is, I think, it's more important than filling the literature gap or novelty. So up to now, I talked about the importance of this topic. Secondly, although we all know the importance of energy transition, we all know the importance of bringing more private investment, but why, as I showed initially in the figures, why the investment is not sufficient? Why we have shortage of finance and private sector did not show enough interest for investing in this project. So for answering this question, we need to put ourselves in a position of a private investor. Because from the side of government role is not profit making. Government role is to, promoting the economy, economic development, social welfare, and so on. So these are the role of government. But private sector is looking for profits. Private sector is looking for low risk projects. So the reason that the investment is not enough is because the profit or rate of return of these projects in general was lower comparing to their counterparts. Secondly, still from the side of investors, various risks are associated with these projects. Thirdly, that I put it as the first one, is lack of long-term financing. Because green projects, like other infrastructural projects, are long-term projects. Therefore, for financing these projects, we need to have long-term money, not 6 months money, not 1 year, not 2 years, but 10 years money, because the return, the break-even point is, for example, 10 years later. Therefore, the finance horizon also needs to be long-term. And fourth challenge is lack of capacity. Capacity, it means knowledge, lack of knowledge in the market actors. That many of the market actors still, they don't have information. They don't know what is green. They don't know exact or clear definition of sustainability, energy transition, and these things. The first thing that I have mentioned is lack of long-term financing. When we are looking at Asian financial markets, like in Uzbekistan, like in Malaysia, Indonesia, India, China, majority of the financial markets in Asian countries are bank dominated. So banks are the major source of funding in Asian economies, and capital markets, insurance companies, and pension funds are much smaller when comparing to banks. This means banks are the main source of funding. Bank resources are coming from deposits. Deposits are usually short to medium term. So, for example, we put the money at bank for 6 months, for 1 year, for 2 years, maximum 5 years. When we want to have a saving for 20 years, for 30 years, usually we don't put the money at bank. In those countries that have a developed pension system, usually they put the money at pension funds or they buy life insurance. Because of that, bank resources, which are short to medium term, are not suitable for long-term financing. And if it happened, it would be maturity mismatch in finance. Secondly, I've mentioned that there are several risks associated with these types of projects. And many of the green technologies are new, although some technologies like solar energy have already experienced significant development and became economically feasible when comparing even to fossil fuels. But many other green technologies, for example, hydrogen or fuel cells or geothermal technology, or many other technologies or green technologies are still in their earlier stage of development. And when a technology is new, it associated with risks. When technology is new, it is more expensive. Therefore, feasibility matter is also important. Apart from that, there are also other type of risks, such as exchange rate risk. Why exchange rate risk? Because many green technologies are results of a regional, or global supply chain. So because of that, exchange rates matter. Third challenge that many investors are paying attention to it is profit or rate of return. And usually when we want to incentivize a sector for the private investment, if the government policy can increase the rate of return and reduce the risk, this will automatically bring the private investment into that sector. So profits or rate of return is the most important thing that investors are paying attention to it. And many green technologies, as I have mentioned, are often earlier in their development stage and not always commercially viable. Although, as I've mentioned, solar, wind already became commercially viable, and thanks to the technological progress, the cost of generating electricity from many of green technologies already became much cheaper than before and became competitive. But still, in many countries, for example, in OECD countries and in other countries, fossil fuel production, consumption is supported by many policies, many individual policies. In Central Asia is also, it's the case, and governments provide lots of support, lots of subsidies for fossil fuels. Another type of subsidy, an indirect subsidy, took place when fossil fuel companies are not taxed very efficiently. So this is also making another unfair competition. Investment in low carbon projects are undermined by lack of familiarity, limited information and knowledge, limited expertise on green infrastructure among the investors. So as I've mentioned, lack of capacity in the market actor is another challenge, another barrier for the development. And several studies have been done on this topic showing that significant investment is needed just for the capacity building, just in order to increase the capacity and knowledge of the market actors. Another barrier is lack of transparent data and financial related data and financial research when talking about green research. And this is the case also in many countries, that difficulties in accessing to data related to green sector is very important. The fourth, up to now, I talked about importance of this topic and introduction, background. Secondly, I talked about the challenges, why, although this sector is very important and this research is very important, why the investment is not enough and the investment is not growing and the gap of finance is widening. From now on, I'm going to focus more on the solutions, that these solutions are also coming from the research that we have done. Earlier, I mentioned that banks are not very suitable for financing long-term projects because of maturity of their resources and expenses. And so it would be maturity mismatch. So what are the suitable institutions? Institutional investors, such as insurance companies, pension funds. So these are the institutions that hold long-term money. As I've mentioned, usually when we want to have a long-term saving, 20-year saving, 30-year saving, we put the money at life insurances or at pension funds and so on. So these institutions, they hold this money, and they could be very suitable institutions for investment in infrastructural projects, including green infrastructures. According to the data, just in OECD member countries, institutional investors are holding almost 100 trillion US dollar asset under management. But unfortunately, they allocate less than 1% of these assets into infrastructural project, and just a small portion of that 1% into sustainable infrastructure or green infrastructure. So it means this should be role of government. For example, government of Uzbekistan incentivize the insurance companies or pension fund in order to allocate a significant portion of their investment into sustainable investment. But by consideration of the risk mitigation and supervision mechanism, because these are the pensioners, these are the private investors' money. This is not their own money. Therefore, they shouldn't put it in high risk projects. So by consideration of the risk mitigation and monitoring mechanism, allocating a significant portion of their assets into their sustainable infrastructure can significantly help to solve the finance gap. Another solution is on increasing the rate of return of the projects. I have mentioned earlier that from the barriers which are existing and that make the private investors less interested for investment into infrastructural projects, including green infrastructure, is because of, first of all, low rate of return, secondly, high risk. So what should be the policy? What should be the incentive in order to increase the rate of return? So this is something that I'm going to present now. Usually in most countries, like in Uzbekistan and many other countries, electricity tariffs are often regulated by government. And governments in many countries, in order to enhance the social welfare and in order to minimize the burden on the households and on the people, usually set the electricity tariffs very low. So the low electricity tariff reduce the private sector investment for interest for investment into the electricity sector, because electricity tariff or the revenue from selling the electricity is the main source of financing, main source of revenue for electricity projects. So, and then on the other hand, if it is very low, then private sector wouldn't show interest. So one solution that in many countries they already started is feed-in tariff, or FIT, that governments for green electricity or electricity from renewable resources usually set higher tariffs and purchase the electricity in that higher tariffs and selling the electricity in cheaper prices to the private sector or to the households. So feed-in tariff usually create a fiscal burden for the government, because in many cases governments need to pay for this gap between selling and buying prices. In some countries, like in Japan, the households pay that extra cost. And when we receive the electricity bill, a percentage of it, some percentage of it is for the renewable electricity that usually generate in a higher cost, and we as a household, we need to pay. So that is also will have negative impact on households' consumption. We need to look for other solutions. One solution is utilizing the spillover effect. But what is the spillover effect in the electricity sector? Imagine that we have a region, that this region is unelectrified. This region doesn't have electricity. Government has a plan for establishment of for example, a hydropower, a solar panel farm, a wind power generator farm in that region in order to generate the electricity, in order to transmit the electricity from that region and flourish the economy of that region. But the government doesn't have enough budget. So government will announce to the private sector that private sector, you come and invest in this region and generate electricity. But as I have mentioned earlier, with cheap electricity tariffs, private sector does not show enough interest to come and invest here. Then government introduce a policy incentive, which is called a spillover effect. But how does it work? When we have electricity in this region, which was unelectrified before, then gradually the economy of this region will flourish. More businesses will be established there, more hotels, more restaurants. The economy of the region will boom and will grow, which is called a spillover effect of power supply. So because of electricity that generated in this region and transmitted to this region, now we have better economy in this region. And this is called a spillover effect. Then price of real estate will increase in that region. Price of land will increase. Businesses will have more sales. Then governments can collect more taxes from that region. This is called a spillover tax. What we suggest is that a portion of this spillover tax needs to be refunded to the private investors. Then by injecting this spillover tax to that project, the rate of return of the project will increase and the project will be more profitable. So this solution is financially sustainable. So as I have mentioned, feed-in tariff has a fiscal burden for the government. Subsidies have fiscal burden for the government. And when we want to look for solution, we need to look for a solution that does not create financial burden for the government. These types of solution can generate the revenue, and from the future revenue that it will generate, government can refund a portion of it to the project. We have done lots of work on spillover effect, modeling it, and also using the data for measuring the exact number of the spillover effect and how much the tax will increase. Or in another research, we used the spillover effect in order to, found the power purchase agreement. In many countries, I'm not sure, but I think in Uzbekistan also, the power companies issue PPA. So PPA is a kind of guarantee that power companies issue for the private investors. And then in the PPA, the feed-in tariff or the electricity tariff prices is mentioned. Then private investor with that guarantee will go and will do the investment because the purchaser is over there and already issued guarantee, and the tariff is also there. But as I have mentioned, feed-in tariff has fiscal burden for the government. In this paper, we showed how to utilize the spillover effect in order to fund the cost of that feed-in tariff. So it means government can have a feed-in tariff, but where does the money come from? The money is coming from the spillover effect, not from the central government budget. Then this can help to make the solution, making this scheme financially feasible. So as I have mentioned earlier, normally in the current case, in many countries, the only source of funding for electricity investment is the tariff or the user charges. But by introducing this policy and by injecting the tax, which is coming from the spillover effect into the project will be profitable and the rate of return of the project will increase. The actual rate of return will increase. Okay. So up to now, I explained about these things. I introduced one solution, which is a spillover effect in the energy sector that can increase the rate of return. The second challenge that I mentioned earlier, which is a barrier for investment of the private sector into green project, is high risk. So what should we do? There are different types of risk, but one of the major type of it is credit risk. And for solving the problem, for mitigating the credit risk, there is a solution. Credit Guarantee Corporation or Credit Guarantee Scheme is a scheme that exists in many countries. Usually, in many countries, when an SME, small and medium-sized enterprises, approach to bank and ask for loan, apply for loan, in many cases, the loan application is rejected because SMEs, in many cases, they don't have enough collateral to provide to a bank. And bank, because they cannot cover the risk, usually they reject the loan application. This is where the SME goes to Credit Guarantee Corporation. Credit Guarantee Corporations are in many cases public entities. They check that SME, whether this SME is eligible, has enough credit worthiness, whether this business is profitable, is it feasible. Then the government or the Credit Guarantee Corporation provide guarantee for some percentage. Credit guarantee scheme is working in many cases and in many countries, and it is very successful for helping the SMEs to access to bank loans. What we propose is to use similar scheme for the green sector, establishing green credit guarantee corporations. These credit guarantee corporations are funded by governments. Just the capital is coming from government. And this is also very important that governments should avoid direct lending, direct financing. Because if governments provide direct loans, this will crowd out the private banks. This will crowd out the private financial institution from the market because no one can compete with the government. Government entities, they don't pay tax. Usually they use lots of, free utilities and so on, and their costs are lower. So private banks, they cannot compete with the government. Government should be only the facilitator. And one indirect participation of government in the energy transition process is through establishment of credit guarantee scheme. So credit guarantee schemes can be funded by the government. Government provide just the capital of these entities, and then these entities, they can run by themselves by generating revenue and also having costs. So how does it work? Imagine that you want to establish a green project. You want to establish a 1 megawatt solar project. You need $1 million US. You approach to bank refuse to lend to you. Then you go to Green Credit Guarantee Corporation. The Green Credit Guarantee Corporation assess your risk, assess the borrower's credit worthiness, the background of him, whether he has enough expertise, whether he has enough qualification, the company or the personnel. And then we'll check the feasibility of the project. This project is feasible. This project is going to be profitable. And if everything is okay, then we'll approve to provide, for example, 80% or 70% of the certain amount of loan to this borrower as a guarantee. Then when this private company or private project has the guarantee from the Credit Guarantee Corporation approach to bank, then in these cases, guarantee of the government act as a collateral. And private financial institution in this case will show interest, will show eagerness to lend. But there are some important things. First point is that governments should avoid 100% guarantee. Because if they provide 100% guarantee, then private banks wouldn't do any risk assessment by themselves. And they will give a loan to any company that has guarantee. Same cases happened in Mongolia, and the Mongolian credit guarantee entity went into failure because of doesn't considering these points, these important points. Then by contribution of ADB, they could revitalize themselves and now they are working. So establishment of Green Credit Guarantee Corporation has two benefits. The first benefit is that credit guarantee can act as a collateral. Therefore, it will shift the loan supply curve to right-hand side, and it will increase the private banks lending to green projects. The second thing is that currently, because of lack of access to collateral, because of asymmetry of information, the loan supply curve is backward bending. What does it mean? It means it cannot grow up to certain after certain amount, and then interest rate increase more and more. When the interest rate increase more and more, it means the green projects will lose their feasibility and they no longer can compete with the fossil fuel projects. So lower risk or risk mitigation can also reduce the interest rate, because there is a relationship between interest rate and risk. When the risk is higher, the lending rate is higher. When the risk of borrower is lower, the lending interest rate is lower. So establishment of credit guarantee scheme for the green sector will not only increase the private sector's lending to this sector, but also will increase the feasibility or rate of return of these projects, because the interest rate or lending rate will increase. So in order to have an optimal credit guarantee scheme, there are some points that needs to be considered. So what is the optimal credit guarantee scheme? Optimal credit guarantee scheme, it means that this credit guarantee system is not relying on government money, because many countries, they establish credit guarantee corporation, but the credit guarantee corporation doesn't work well, and every year government needs to inject money to these funds. So they cannot run by themselves. They are not financially sustainable. Or in some countries, credit guarantee corporations are charging the borrowers too much fee. In that case, also, they are not optimal, because they are imposing more cost, more pressure on the shoulder of the borrower. So in order to have an optimal credit guarantee scheme, we need to consider both sides. The borrower side, which are green project owners, such as solar project developers or investors, and wind power generators, and so on. And the right-hand side are lenders, banks. In the borrower side, project owners needs to pay some fee because they want to receive guarantee, so they need to pay some fee. It is like insurance. When you want to buy an insurance, you need to pay insurance premium. But the important thing is that this fee needs to be vary for different clients, for different projects, depending on the risk of the project. Charging same fee for all clients regardless of the risk is creating moral hazard, and it wouldn't provide an incentive for the project owners to enhance their soundness, to enhance their credit worthiness. So first of all, Credit Guarantee Corporation needs to adopt various fees, depending, for example, 10 different fees, depending on the risk or depending on the credit scoring of the borrowers. This is first thing. Second important point is that this scheme is a policy instrument. This is a government policy. Therefore, governments need to monitor the economic system, and governments should be dynamic. It means when we are in economic recession, usually green projects, they find more difficulties for accessing to finance. So during the economic recessions, governments should reduce the fee so that these projects can have access to finance cheaper and easier. And when we pass the recession and enter to the boom, then gradually increase the fee. Why increasing the fee? In order to avoid bubble creation, because if it is very cheap, then too much lending is going to one specific sector. On the right-hand side, we have banks. Banks also needs to be monitored. Banks needs to be classified based on their credit score, because some banks are very sound, some banks have very low level of non-performing loans, and some banks are unsound. If government provide the same guarantee coverage, for example, 80% of their lending to green project for all banks, that is also creating a moral hazard. But if government or the public credit guarantee provide higher guarantee coverage for a sound bank and lower guarantee coverage for an unsound or lowers the bank with lower level of soundness, then that is a reason, that is an incentive that the banks also manage their assets, reduce their non-performing loans, and enhance their credit worthiness. This is another thing. Second thing is that credit guarantee coverage also needs to be function of macroeconomic situation. And when we are in economic recession, governments should increase the guarantee coverage. When we are in economic boom, reducing the guarantee coverage. For example, same thing happened in Japan. In Japan, in March 2011, a great earthquake and a tsunami hit Fukushima and nuclear power plants. Many businesses suffered in that region. Many businesses there lost their activities. So government for some specific period increased the guarantee coverage to 100%. It means 100% of the lending of banks to that sector, to that region is guaranteed by the government. Then for 3 or 4 years that region reconstructed and revitalized, then government again reduce the guarantee coverage. So this means government policies needs to be dynamic, and governments should monitor the economic cycles, and depending on the economic cycles, set the fee of guarantee and also setting the guarantee coverage that the banks receive. So if you are interested to read more about Green Credit Guarantee Scheme, this paper is available that you can download from Finance Research Letter. So we provided a model, methodology, and so on. And here we did the research for measuring the optimal credit guarantee fee. For example, you want to do a research and you want to measure what should be the optimal fee that project developers pay in Uzbekistan, because if the fee is too much low, then it cannot provide sufficient funding for the credit guarantee corporation. Then that credit guarantee corporation every year rely on government money. And on the other hand, if this fee is too much high, this is creating another burden for the private sector. So the fee should be optimal, shouldn't be high and shouldn't be low. And there is a model we provided in this research on measurement of the fee. Okay, let me conclude my talks and also provide some policy recommendation for all countries, especially for developing countries. It is important that too much reliance on overseas finance will create future burden for the country, and it is creating external debt. So the priority should be reliance on domestic saving and domestic money, as well as foreign direct investment is welcome. But borrowing from other countries is creating burden for the future of the country. Lack of long-term financing, existence of various risks, low rate of return, and lack of capacity in the market actors are the major challenges for the development of green projects. I mentioned that institutional investors, such as insurance companies, pension funds, they are holding long-term money and they can be potential long-term investors in green projects. Utilizing the tax revenue by use of a spillover effect of energy supply will increase the rate of return of green projects, and it is an incentive for the investors. For financing smaller scale renewable energy projects, also relying on micro investments such as hometown investment trust funds, village funds are appropriate. Green credit guarantee scheme will reduce the asymmetry of information, reduce the expected default loss, and it can help to reduce the lending rate to green projects. Therefore, not only it can mitigate the risk of financing green projects, but also it can help to increase the rate of return. And in order to avoid moral hazard and in order to have a optimal and financially sustainable credit guarantee scheme, it is very important that the guarantee fee, first of all, it needs to be vary depending on the risk of borrowers. Secondly, it also needs to be function of the macroeconomic situation, and the credit guarantee ratio also needs to be same. And these are the summary of the tools that I have introduced in this presentation, their functions and their applications. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Professor Farhad. It was a splendid presentation. We really enjoyed your presentation skills, I would say, and it was very extensive. And I believe that our audience have learned a lot about research in green green economy and green financing as well. And I guess would like to welcome some questions from the audience. If there are any questions, please raise your hand, or you can leave your questions in the comment section, and then we can ask Professor Farhad. Professor Farhad, I wanted to you've touched in the topic that green credit guarantee companies. I guess this is a unique idea, and how do you see this sort of scheme being applied in countries such as Uzbekistan? I mean, resource rich countries where majority of or a significant proportion of electricity generation relies on the natural gas and other fossil fuels.
Yes. Thank you very much for your good comments. So actually, I haven't studied Uzbekistan, but as far as I know, in many Central Asian countries, credit guarantee corporations are existing. And credit guarantee corporations are mainly active for filling the finance gap of SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. So credit guarantee corporation is very suitable for Uzbekistan. Why? First of all, because Uzbekistan's financial system is also bank-oriented. And credit guarantee corporations are very useful for those countries that the banks are the major source of funding. So this is first thing. Second thing is that I see that Uzbekistan government is doing very well, most recently doing lots of reform and try to make the role of government minimized comparing to the past and reducing the role of state in the whole economy. So from that aspect also, credit guarantee corporation is very useful because it is avoiding direct participation of government, and government is just providing an indirect participation through the capital participation in this company, and then this company is running by itself and it can help the private sector to come to the economy. So from that perspective also, credit guarantee scheme is in line with the macro policy of the current government in Uzbekistan that is following such policy. So on the other hand, as credit guarantee schemes are existing, so in the short term, it is possible to use the existing structure of credit guarantee corporation, which are for SMEs, and they establish specific sections for green sector or a specific scheme for the green sector, for assessment of their risk, monitoring their projects, and providing guarantee for green projects in Uzbekistan.
Thank you so much for an extensive answer. Just to continue in that topic, so such corporations, do they prioritize, let's say, SMEs who are actually promoting, let's say, green economy or green economic transition within their organizations? What will be their main objective? What will be the priorities for such corporations?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, as I've mentioned, thank you for a good question. Credit guarantee corporations, traditionally, their goal, their objective was for development of SMEs. But as I have mentioned, this scheme worked very well and it helped SMEs to grow very well. Similar scheme could be similar entities could be established for the green sector. That can be a long run plan because institutional development is not easy, and in one day we cannot establish new instrument, a new institution. It needs rules, regulation, law, and so on, especially when it's going from the side of government. So in the short term, in the medium term, government can use the capacity of the existing credit guarantee scheme, but not limiting their activities for the SMEs in the green sector.
Projects.
But the whole,
Okay.
a specific portion, a specific division from that credit guarantee corporation can be allocated for the green sector and can work. Then in the long term, an independent entity could be established for as a green credit guarantee scheme.
I get, yeah. So in a way, I guess these corporations, green credit guaranteeing corporations, could actually, let's say, spell out their priorities, such as that, if they are going to stay as a guarantors in the process, then they could actually make sure that the companies who are seeking actually loans from the banks, they spent certain amount of that funding into let's say for let's say renewable energy maybe, or energy saving activities of the organization. So right,
yes,
this okay, thank you so much. And we have one question regarding the DCGCs as well. Dr. Jahangir is mentioning that what are the key success factors for a well-designed green credit guarantee program?
Yes, thank you very much. This is very important. As I've mentioned, there are several cases of failure, like the example of Mongolia that I have mentioned. There are several points because this topic, credit guarantee, is very important, and we can also allocate one specific section on it. And I have a book on it, on credit guarantee scheme. And I have also advised several countries, governments, on development of credit guarantee scheme. So there are several points. First of all, the initial fund needs to have sufficient capital. In many countries, government establish a credit guarantee corporation, but the initial capital of this company is not enough to run in a country level. Because imagine that you, as a credit guarantee corporation, you have $1 billion capital. It means your guarantee creation power is multiplied by 10. It's 10x. It means $10 billion. So then in the size of the economy, the whole economy, this might be small. So sufficient capital initially is very important. Second thing is that government is just providing the initial capital and then having a good financing scheme so that this company run by its own revenue every year and not every year creating a burden for the government and look for the injection of capital from the government every year. So what does it mean? It means for providing guarantee, this company is receiving some fee. This fee needs to be adequate. This needs to be calculated. It shouldn't be too much low. It shouldn't be too much high, as I have mentioned. Then this fee needs to be dynamic in different economic cycles. On the other hand, this guarantee entity also needs to check the banks and provide different guarantee coverage to banks. This is another thing. Another important point is that we are talking about guarantee scheme. Guarantee scheme, it means guarantee corporation is just one part of it. Another part is bank. Another part is a credit scoring company. In Japan, there is one company, it's called Credit Risk Database. This company is gathering the data of the companies and projects and give a scoring from 1 to 10. When the score is very low, it means this company for borrowing from bank and for receiving guarantee needs to pay higher fee. If the score is very high, it means they need to pay lower fee. Another point is that this company, the scoring company, should be independent. The scoring company should not be inside of guarantee company. Otherwise, it will be a bias in the result. Because if I'm going to assess someone for providing guarantee, I usually assess very low because I don't want to give guarantee. So assessments needs to be done independently. As I've mentioned, in Japan, there is one entity, it's called CRD. I used to work there as a economist for development of their model. So this entity is also very important. The model that they use for their credit scoring, the model needs to be updated periodically, what variables they are using in their credit assessment, and so on. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Farhad. We have another question from our audience, Dr. Pratin Alayarov. Like he just raised his hands.
Assalamu alaikum. Dear Professor, thank you for your video presentation on green financing. I am Mehtashamul Haq. My desktop was having some problems, so I cannot raise a hand there. So I ask Dr. Piridin so that I can have a question and some discussion with the professor. I'm really thankful for your valuable presentation. Sir, if it is better that if you write down the points, because I don't have specific questions. The reason is that when I was listening and going through your paper abstracts and the policy recommendations that you were presenting, so some points are in my mind that I want to have your overview on those points. So the first point is, sir, do you think that for green financing we need to have fiscal reforms? Because mostly in developing countries, energy sector is providing the revenue for the government. So if we don't have reforms, so it will be a hurdle in the green financing. This is the first point. Because in most developing countries, they don't allow any individual to sell directly to customers any form of energy, because their taxation base may be weak, or they may not have the enough tax net base. So for that, they need to control over the energy sector. So that's the first point, that fiscal reforms is needed. Second, sir, do you not believe that it will be good if you include in this financing institution that you are suggesting, instead of for the businesses, it may also have a policy on the micro level, even to finance on the for the customers. For example, like in some developing countries, they are asking the homeowners if they want to have their own solar system. So the government is there to provide, or the NGOs is there to provide, and because they are not selling to anyone, So do you not think so that this kind of model that you are suggesting should include these things? And the last one is that uh, for the financial institutions, mostly they will have the human skills on the financing side. So every SME will have their own structures, their own investment, and their own way of business. So, do you not think like it will be difficult for these GCCs to look after this risk factors? Thank you.
Thank you very much. You raised very good questions, very good comments. Thank you very much for your good questions. So first of all, regarding the fiscal reform, so in long run, yes, in order to achieve the carbon neutral economy, Ministry of Finance and other sectors in the economy, including Ministry of Energy, they need to work together. For example, when we are talking about carbon taxation, when we are talking about utilizing the spillover effect of the tax revenue. So these needs to be coordinated among the ministries, and it cannot be done solely by Ministry of Energy by itself. However, in the short term, it's also possible that in specific at the related ministry goes forward, and then simultaneously other ministries come. For example, as I have mentioned earlier, and as you are also highlighted, in many developing countries, the power sector is running by the power sector is running by the public sector. The public sector, the power sector is running by the public sector, and I mean, government needs to bring more private investment for filling the gap which is existing in the electricity sector. And usually in these cases, from one side, government doesn't want to increase the tariff, the electricity tariff, because it will have negative impact on the social welfare. On the other hand, if the electricity tariff is low, then it is not interesting for the private investors. Then many countries introduce feed-in tariff, as I have mentioned. But feed-in tariff also creating a fiscal burden for the government. What I have proposed, the spillover effect, and using the spillover effect for funding the feed-in tariff and power purchase agreement, this is a suitable solution that Ministry of Energy in Uzbekistan can follow. Second point that you have mentioned, yes, the small scale energy projects such as solar rooftops, these are also very important. In today's presentation, due to the shortage of time, I just focus on larger scale energy projects such as a hydropower project, such as a solar farms, wind farm, and so on. But for energy transition, especially in the household sector, micro scales, solar rooftops are also very important. They also have their own financing schemes that in the future presentation I would be glad to cover. For example, using crowdfunding, or in conclusion of my presentation, I mentioned about hometown investment trust funds. Hometown investment trust fund is a form of crowdfunding that initiated in Japan, and using this scheme, the number of households that have access to solar rooftop increased significantly. So this is also about another thing. And green credit guarantee, the third question that you have mentioned, green credit guarantee, it's not limited for SMEs. So maybe it was some confusion. Let me mention again that credit guarantee corporations originally initiated for helping to fill the finance gap of small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs. So the history of credit guarantee corporation back to 1930s that started from Japan, then many other countries established. What I have mentioned is that we can learn from this scheme in order to establish a dedicated scheme. It's called Green Credit Guarantee Corporation for the green sector, not for SMEs. Then this entity, which mainly run by the government provide the capital of it, can see the projects, project owner, those who wants to establish the project, assess their credit risk, doing the credit scoring of it by an independent credit scoring company, and then providing guarantee to those green projects that have higher level of credit worthiness and higher chance of success and are important for Uzbekistan and in line with the policies and strategies of the government.
Thank you so much.
I
Thank you
hope
so
I
much.
could answer my question.
Thank you very much, Professor Farhad. We have next question. Sorry, there are many questions. Next question is from Dr. Nurbek. He's mentioning that what are the biggest obstacles to the growth of green finance? In which countries green finance projects are being implemented at the higher level? Or
Okay.
So this
Thank
was
you
the
very
question.
much. Yes, so regarding the obstacles for green finance, I think I have mentioned some of them. First of all, the most important thing that the private investors are looking at is rate of return, is profit. Secondly, risk is also another thing. And thirdly, lack of long-term financing, because in order to develop green projects, we need to have long-term money, not short-term money or medium-term money. And fourthly, lack of capacity in the market actors. Many investment bank, many bankers, many stakeholders, they don't know what is green. They don't know what is green investment. So capacity building, knowledge sharing, this is very important for enhancing the capacity in the stakeholders. And there are many successful cases. China is doing very well, but the Chinese case is more state-owned. So because Chinese development is when an instruction come from the government side, then state-owned banks follow that policy. Japan is more market-oriented, and private sector has more, involvement. In EU also, European case, there are very good examples, very good development. EU has EU taxonomy on green finance. Having a taxonomy is very important. Taxonomy, it means make it clear that what is green project based on clear criteria. So for Uzbekistan also, development of taxonomy is very important. Another thing is that nowadays many countries by themselves individually, they plan to have taxonomy. I think that is also needs to be revised, because we need more regional initiatives. We need more international initiatives rather than national, because nowadays investments are floating. Investments are moving from one country to another country. Therefore, we need to have a same language. Taxonomy, it means same language in different countries.
In your opinion, Dr. Farhad, what do you think, which country has been more efficient? As you have just mentioned, the cases of Japan and China, where in China it's basically promoted by the state, and then in Japan it's more of like market oriented. In your, let's say, from your own observations and then from your own expertise, what do you think, which country has been more efficient in terms of green financing?
Yes, so I think we can learn from each country. So in China, there are very good examples. And for example, in order to have a carbon neutral society and achieving the energy transition goal, we need to follow different policies simultaneously. So we cannot say only green bond is enough, only carbon taxation is enough. So we need to have different policies simultaneously. And then the effectiveness of each of these policies needs to be assessed based on the ecosystem that we have in Uzbekistan, because the financial system in Uzbekistan is different from China, is different from Japan. So these needs to be localized. Each of these countries, they have good examples. So good experiences. China, they have good experiences in ETS, in emission trading schemes, in green bond issuance. On the other hand, but they don't have carbon taxation. They didn't charge entities. But Japan already have carbon taxation, already have a good ETS, emission trading schemes, and in green bond issuance also have good experiences, and also in green loans as well. So in Asia, if you want to ask, I can say China and Japan, these two can be good can provide good study cases for Uzbekistan.
Thank you so much. With the next question. I hope you're not tired. We've been talking for the last hour and a half, and thank you for your time again. We have Dr. Anton Kostychenko. He's saying that, in my opinion, an important element of the topic of green finance is green budgeting of the state. How important it is, in your opinion, and how can the state start working in that direction?
Thank you very much. So yeah, budgeting is important, but in the prerequisite of having a successful green finance is good planning, in my idea. Planning is more important than budgeting, because if we plan very well, if we prepare the projects very well, if we make the projects profitable, if government can introduce some schemes for mitigate the risk, money will come. So we shouldn't expect that government spend for the development of the project. So budgeting is good, but budgeting for the preparation of the project, not for the development of the projects. Projects needs to be developed by private sector, whether domestic Uzbekistan or foreign investors or development banks, ADB, EBRD, and so on, international organization, as well as foreign investors. So preparation and planning, I think, is the most important stage.
Thank you very much, Professor Farhad. And from your previous previous answer, we have another question regarding the green financing or green financial development. Dr. Gulamov is mentioning that. What do you think about Central Asian regions in terms of green financing development or green finance development perspectives? What do you think? Where do you see the perspectives of this region?
Thank you very much. So Central Asian countries are some of them are resource-rich countries like Uzbekistan, like Kazakhstan, like Azerbaijan. Some of them are relying on import of fossil fuel. But I think for both group of countries, for resource-rich as well as resource-poor countries, planning for green finance is important. Another thing is that, for example, for all these countries are member of CAREC, Central Asian Regional Economic Cooperation Initiative. So when I talked about taxonomy, when I talked about regional initiative, so I think it would be more interesting and more effective if through these kinds of schemes, such as CAREC, these types of topics be discussed for having a regional initiative, a regional taxonomy on green finance. And as I've worked also with CAREC Institute on some, as a resource person on some capacity building programs or some research programs. I haven't seen if any of these countries they took the initiative. It's good that Uzbekistan be the first country to work on the taxonomy. That can also help to enhancing the regional integration in Central Asian countries, as there are many things in common.
Of course. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. We will take one more question. If anyone has a question, please raise your hand, or you can leave your question in the comment section, please. And if you have questions in Uzbek, please do give your questions. We'll translate and ask Professor Farhad. In the meantime, Professor Farhad, we know that you were editor in numerous reputable journals, and you also served as guest editor in so many journals. We would like your opinion on hot topics. What are hot topics for research in this time of the year?
Thank you very much. So, generally speaking, I mean, energy transition and sustainability related topics. When I'm editing for journals, I see that there are many submissions related to that. Majority of these submissions are from China nowadays. And from other parts of the world, we have less submissions. So it is good that from Uzbekistan, young scholars, they work on these topics on energy transition, on carbon neutrality, on ways to introduce green finance tools such as green bonds. What are the prerequisites for issuing green bond in Uzbekistan? I think Uzbekistan also issued green bond a few years ago. So collecting the data related to that and working on it. But another point is that since many publishers, they have readers from different parts of the world, usually one country case study have less probability, less chance to be published in a good journal. So if I work just using on data from one country, so the chance is lower. So regional studies are more welcomed in higher ranked journals as they can attract more number of readers. Publisher consider from the business perspective of it. Publishers, they want to have more readers, more downloads, more citations, and so on. So although one topic you think it's very important for Uzbekistan, but from the point of view of journal, maybe it is not that much important for general readers. So you also need to consider these points. But generally speaking, sustainability related topic with a regional perspective are attractive.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And from the researcher's point of view, your opinion is very important for us. What do editors usually pay attention to when they read the manuscript? For instance, you receive the manuscript, right? And the topic is related to energy transition, and you're reading the manuscript. What do you, let's say, what are your priorities? What do you pay attention? Can you please count like three important sections of the paper?
Sure. So in my idea, maybe other editors' idea be different. In my idea, I think appearance is very important. Appearance, when I see someone, first I see the appearance. If the appearance is not good, that person, that object, that idea, that book wouldn't attract me enough. So the first thing is that the paper should be well prepared. Well prepared, it means having a clear abstract, sections should be numbered, the language should be good, and the conclusion should be there. Referencing should be in line with the guideline of the journal, the main body, keywords, everything. So first of all, the format, the appearance is very important. And what we usually read, first of all, is abstract. So the abstract is very important that the major reason for this rejection is out of scope. That first, before submitting a paper to a journal, we need to read the scope of that journal. And some journals are titled Economics and Finance, but this journal is more finance oriented. If my paper is more economics oriented, better I don't submit to that journal. So before submitting to a journal, first better to read the scope of the journal, read similar papers that have been published in that journal and see whether my paper is also related to that or not. And also, I think introduction is very important. Following and having the essential elements of introduction. What are the research questions? First, I should ask myself, and I need to state in my introduction, what are the objective of doing this research? What is the necessity of doing this research? What is the contribution to the literature? What is my major finding and what is the main policy implication. This needs to be briefly mentioned in the introduction. And on the other hand, also, this is what I have done in my research, and I expect to see in the paper is to have a robust theoretical background, because by econometrics we can find any result that we want. So you see, if you add one more lag, if you reduce one more lag, you can get positive or negative relationship. The important thing is to show to the readers that these two variables, they have some theoretical relationship between them. So usually after literature review, it is important to have a section on the theoretical background for showing the theoretical relationship between the explanatory variables and dependent variables. And then from our findings in the theoretical background, then we go for the empirical part, which is section 4. Yeah.
Thank you. Touching the last point that you just mentioned, that how important is it? How important is the econometric methods used in the paper? So econometric analysis part of the research paper.
Yes. So it depends on the journal. So some journals, some editors are looking for quantitative works, some less. Frankly speaking, nowadays, due to the development of AI, ChatGPT, and so on, content generation became very easy. And usually those papers which are just review of the literature and descriptive policy, and they don't have numerical works in them, quantitative works, they have lower chance, although it depending on the journal, but I'm talking generally. So having quantitative works, analytical works, I think it's very important, and generally speaking. And econometrics doesn't need to be very sophisticated. And even by a simple econometrics, if we say something new and say something which is important for the literature and for the society, we can have high chance of being accepted.
Thank you so much, Professor Farhad, for your time, and we really enjoyed your conversation, your presentation, and the discussions afterwards. Okay, so we have one more question. This is going to be the last question. What is the pathway to become a renowned researcher? So how do I become a very well-known researcher? As I'm new in this area, what should I pay attention to? Currently, I'm working on developing data science. What are the skills or parts, the important things that I have to pay attention in order to become a renowned researcher? Could you please give a quick response to this?
Sure. So first of all, I think it's important that we have a deep knowledge of one specific area. Economics, finance, data science that you are working. So these are very wide, very general. It's important to go deeper in one or two specific sectors, and having more reading, more research output in those one or two specific sectors. And then having more publications. It means more paper come under your name with a specific keyword, with one or two specific keywords, be published under your name. Then gradually, if publishing in good journal, those papers will be cited. And then you will have 1, 2, and more than that, highly cited papers. And then when you have more highly cited papers, you will be highly cited researcher. Simultaneously, following other ways is important, because journal readers are more professionals who are in one specific field. Following book publishing is also very important. Book readers are more general. They are from different backgrounds. They are from academia, experts, university, and so on. Publishing books, in addition to that, is important. And in addition to that, producing other means of academic research, such as when I'm writing a paper, then summarize it in 1 page or 2 page as a policy brief, so that everyone, a policymaker, wouldn't go and read my journal paper. He doesn't have time, or maybe he doesn't understand econometrics, he doesn't understand mathematics. But if I write it in a simple language in 1 page as a policy brief, then more people will read my paper and more people will know my works. So it means following and producing different types of research output simultaneously is very important.
Thank you so much. So, so it's very important to focus on one or two subjects, right? And to become a very well-known researcher in that area or in that field. So it's important that researchers specialize in a specific field rather than publishing in different fields.
Exactly.
Or different subjects. Thank you so much, Professor. I'd like to thank you again for your time. And it was, like I said, it's been very insightful and informative. We really did enjoy that you went back to the foundations of green finance for us. You extensively explained all the, let's say, keywords and all the important concepts in this field. And I'd like to also thank my colleague, Dr. Farhad Taghizadeh, for making this webinar happen today. This is the episode number 3 of this webinar, and would like to have you on again in our webinar again in the future. And we hope you also enjoyed from the questions as well and from our presence during this webinar. Thank you so much for your time. Sure. And thank you all for joining us. And please do invite your friends and colleagues. And we look forward to the next episode of this webinar. Thank you very much, Professor Farhad. Again, you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. Bye-bye.